Hello, my friend. Today I bring you another lost legend from the depths of Middle-earth. Close your eyes, feel the magic surround you. Our journey begins. The Forbidden Halls beneath Moria, an epic in the elder days. Section 1. Shadowed Beginnings. In the days when shadow first stirred beneath the Misty Mountains, when the stones of Khazad-dûm whispered of things unnamed, there came to Moria's gates a silence deeper than darkness. Not peace, nor quiet slumber of abandoned places, but the hushed breath of earth itself, holding back words that might wake what sleeps in the deepest places. The winds from Redhorn Pass carried more than mountain snow's cold bite. They bore tidings only the wise could read, tales written in rustling leaves and distant raven cries. For those with eyes to see, the very air thickened with portent, as though the world had drawn breath and forgotten to release it. Mithrandir felt the first stirring of unease. Not since the necromancer's fall had such darkness pressed upon his thoughts. Yet this was different, older, more patient. Where Dol Guldur raged with barely contained malice, this shadow moved with ages' weight, deliberate as seasons turning, inexorable as stones wearing. Standing upon the high road through the valley before the great gates, the grey pilgrim gazed upon Miramir, its waters black beneath gathering dusk. Once, these waters reflected Durin's crown, and 1,000 lamps danced upon its surface like earth-bound stars. Now it lay dark and quiet, and if faces moved beneath its depths, they belonged not to the living world. The gates stood open as they had for 2 centuries, vast portals gaping like some primordial beast's mouth. No light shone within, no hammer's ring greeted travelers. The dwarves had delved too deep, awakening what they could not master. Yet what that thing might be, whether it stirred in the world's deepest foundations, none could say with certainty. Gandalf felt it pressing against his consciousness like cold tide. Something walked the halls beneath, something that had not walked there in Durin's glory days. The mountain's foundations pulsed with alien rhythm, as though a great heart had begun beating in the darkness below. A raven cried from the peaks above, sharp and mournful in thin air. Once, thrice it called, then silence. Beyond the mountain's curve, smoke rose pale against darkening sky. No comfort fires these. They rose from places where no fires should burn, their smoke carrying scents of deep places and forgotten fears. The wizard's staff, carved from white tree wood, grew heavy in his hand. Its crowning crystal, usually bright with inner light, flickered uncertainly, struggling against some dimming force. Soon choices would be made. Soon the long peace would be tested, perhaps found wanting. But not yet, not this day. For now, only watching, waiting, and growing certainty that beneath mountain roots, something ancient stirred. Section 2. A Whisper in the Trees. 3 days hence, when the shadow's touch had grown stronger upon the lands about Moria, Gandalf walked among the golden eaves of Lorien. Here, where time moved differently and the very leaves sang of elder days, even the ancient music seemed muted, as though the Mallan trees listened for sounds that should not come. Lady Galadriel awaited him beside the mirror's pool, her face grave with foreknowledge. The light of Arundel's star held within her ring, Nenya flickered uncertainly, and in her eyes lay depths of sorrow that spoke of visions unwelcome. "You have felt it too," Gandalf said, though it was not a question. The White Lady nodded, her gaze turning toward the Misty Mountains that rose like broken teeth against the eastern sky. In the deepest hour of night, when even the stars grow dim, I hear it stirring, she replied, her voice like silver bells touched by frost. Something that was bound is breaking free, something that should have remained in the darkness until the world's ending. They spoke long into the evening of what signs they had seen. The beasts of the forest had grown restless, fleeing southward without apparent cause. The very waters of Celebdil Galad ran darker than their wont, and strange lights had been seen flickering in the heights where no light should be. Durin's bane, Galadriel whispered at last, naming what they both feared to name. The flame of Udun that drove the dwarves from their greatest stronghold. It sleeps no more. The wind that stirred the golden leaves brought with it echoes of distant drums, deep and rhythmic as a funeral march. Somewhere in the deeps, ancient feet were walking paths not trod since the elder days, when the world was young and darkness had not yet learned to hide. If it wakes fully, Gandalf mused, the shadow's reach will extend far beyond Moria's halls. The gap will become a highway for evil, and all the lands between mountain and sea will know fear. Galadriel's mirror, fed by Silver Stream, showed glimpses of what might come to pass. In its depths, fire walked the ancient halls, and the very stones cracked beneath its passage. But there too were other visions, of small hands bearing great burdens, of paths through darkness that led at last to light. The hour grows late, the lady said, yet not so late that hope must fail. There are powers yet in this world that evil has not counted, small perhaps in its reckoning, but great in their purpose. As dawn approached, painting the malon leaves with gold and rose, Gandalf prepared to depart. His road would take him north to Erebor and the halls of kings, where ancient alliances might yet be awakened. But first, there was another matter to attend, a door in Moria that had not been opened and should not be, yet might provide answers to questions that pressed upon them all. The lady's parting words followed him as he rode from Lorien's borders. Beware the deep places, Mithrandir. What stirs there has patience beyond mortal understanding, and malice older than the moon. Section 3. The Lone Rider, northward, rode Gandalf through the wild lands, between mountain and river, where few paths ran and fewer still were safe for solitary travelers. The grey horse, Shadowfax, bore him with speed that outran the wind, yet even that noble steed seemed troubled at the scents that drifted down from the mountain heights. The road to Erebor was long and treacherous, winding through valleys where trolls might lurk and overpasses where the very stones seemed to watch with malevolent eyes. But it was not earthly dangers that caused the wizard's brow to furrow with concern. In the distance, always in the distance, he could feel the pulse of that ancient evil growing stronger with each league that brought him closer to the mountain's heart. By night, strange lights flickered among the peaks, not the warm glow of dwarf lanterns or the clean flame of beacon fires, but a ruddy gleam that spoke of furnaces in the deep places where no furnaces should burn. The very air grew thick and hard to breathe, as though poisoned by vapors rising from fissures in the earth. On the third day of his journey, as Shadowfax picked his way carefully along a narrow ledge that skirted a precipitous gorge, Gandalf heard it clearly for the first time, a sound that made his blood run cold. from somewhere far below, echoing up through the mountain's bones, came the rhythmic beating of drums, not the joyous hammering of dwarfsmiths at their forges, but a slow, measured cadence that spoke of ritual and summoning. The wizard dismounted and pressed his ear to the stone. Through the mountain's substance, he could feel the vibration of those drums, and beneath them, something else, a low growling that seemed to emanate from the earth's very core. Whatever dwelt in Moria's depths was stirring more actively now, responding perhaps to some call that only it could hear. Shadowfax whinnied nervously, his breath misting in the suddenly chill air. Even this lord of horses, kin to those that ran in Valinor before the world's beginning, felt the wrongness that emanated from the mountain's heart. "Peace, my friend," Gandalf murmured, though he himself felt anything but peaceful. "We shall not venture into those halls unbidden. Not yet, but knowledge we must have if we are to stand against what wakes there." As they continued northward, skirting the mountain's eastern flanks, the wizard's mind turned to lore half remembered, to ancient tales of the elder days when powers greater than any now in Middle-earth strode the earth openly. He thought of the Balrogs, servants of Morgoth, creatures of shadow and flame that had been among the most terrible of the Dark Lord's servants. Most had been destroyed in the War of Wrath that ended the First Age, when the host of Valinor came at last to Middle-earth and cast down Morgoth's throne. But some, it was whispered, had fled into the deep places of the world, there to hide until the world's ending. If such a one had indeed taken refuge in Moria's halls, drawn by the warmth of the dwarf forges and the depth of their delving, then all the strength of the free peoples might not suffice to cast it out. Yet knowledge of the truth was essential, for only by understanding the nature of the threat could they hope to counter it. The drums beat on, a funeral rhythm that seemed to echo in the very stones, calling forth memories of ancient battles and defeats long past. Section 4. Dol Guldur in the distance. 7 days from Lorien, the road bent eastward toward the shadow of Mirkwood, and there, rising like a poisoned fang against the grey sky, stood the hill of Dol Guldur. Though the necromancer had been driven forth not 10 years past, still the fortress brooded upon its height, and evil things crept in its shadow. Gandalf paused upon a rise of ground, gazing across the leagues that separated him from that accursed tower. Even from this distance, he could feel the malice that clung to those stones, the lingering taint of darkness that no cleansing could wholly wash away. The very air above the hill shimmered with unnatural heat, as though fires burned there still. But it was not Dol Guldur that had drawn him to this vantage point. From here, looking west across the vale, he could see the full majesty of the Misty Mountains rising like a wall against the sky. And there, almost hidden among the greater peaks, lay the Red Horn Pass and the gates of Moria. Even at this distance, the wrongness was apparent. Where once the mountain had stood proud and clean against the sky, now a dark stain seemed to spread from its heart, a shadow that no sunlight could dispel. The very stone appeared to weep with moisture that caught the light strangely, as though tainted by some inner corruption. Shadowfax stamped and snorted, unwilling to approach closer to either of these places of darkness. The horse's wisdom was greater than many gave him credit for, and Gandalf did not urge him forward. There would be time enough for closer investigation when the need was dire. Instead, the wizard dismounted and stood long in contemplation, his grey robes stirring in the wind that came down from the mountains. In his mind, he was drawing connections, seeing patterns that filled him with unease. The timing was too convenient to be mere chance. The stirring in Moria, coming so soon after the necromancer's expulsion from Dol Guldur. Could it be that the removal of one evil had somehow weakened the bonds that held another in check? The magics that bound such creatures were complex and intertwined, each affecting the others in ways that even the wise could not always foresee. Or perhaps, and this thought was even more troubling, the two evils had been in communication, the necromancer's presence serving to keep some greater darkness quiescent. With Sauron driven from his stronghold, was it possible that other servants of the ancient darkness felt emboldened to reveal themselves? The sun sank low behind the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and blood. In that dying light, both Dol Guldur and the peaks above Moria seemed to glow with inner fire, as though the darkness within them responded to the coming night. As stars began to appear in the darkening heavens, Gandalf saw lights flicker to life in places where no lights should be. High upon Moria's flanks, red gleams appeared like watching eyes, while from Dol Guldur's tower came a pale phosphorescence that made the wizard's skin crawl. "The darkness gathers," he murmured to himself, "and evil things wake from their long slumber. Soon we must choose to act or to let the shadow spread until all hope is lost." With that sobering thought, he remounted Shadowfax and turned away from both places of darkness, riding hard toward the north and the kingdom under the mountain. Section 5. Into the Black. It was in the grey hour before dawn, when the world lay hushed between night and day, that Gandalf at last came to the gates of Erebor. The great mountain rose before him like a sleeping giant, its peak crowned with snow that gleamed pale in the starlight. But even here, in this place of renewed hope, where Thorin's line once more held the throne of their fathers, the shadow from the west could be felt. King Dain Ironfoot received the wizard in the throne hall, deep within the mountain's heart. The dwarf lord's face was grim beneath his iron crown, and his eyes held the weight of sleepless nights. Around him stood the lords of his house, their beards streaked with grey though they were yet in their prime, for care and watching had aged them beyond their years. "You have felt it too," Gandalf said without preamble, for there was no time for courtly pleasantries. The stirring in the west. Dain nodded heavily. "Aye, wizard. My people speak of drums in the deep places, of lights where no lights should be. Our miners refuse to work the lower galleries, claiming they hear footsteps in passages that have been sealed for centuries." The Dwarf King gestured to a great map that hung upon the wall, showing the intricate network of tunnels and halls that riddled the lonely mountain. Red marks had been placed at various points, each representing a place where strange sounds or sights had been reported. "It grows worse each night," one of the lords reported, his voice heavy with foreboding. "Whatever stirs in Moria sends its influence far through the mountain roots. Our strongest warriors speak of feeling watched when they venture into the deepest mines." Gandalf studied the map with growing unease. The pattern of disturbances was clear. They followed the old dwarf roads that had once connected Erebor to Moria, paths delved in the glory days when the two kingdoms had been as one. If something was indeed stirring in the ancient halls beneath the Misty Mountains, its power could travel along those forgotten ways. "Has there been contact?" the wizard asked. "Any attempt to reach Moria itself?" "Nay," Durin replied firmly, "nor shall there be, while I draw breath. Whatever drove my kinfolk from those halls still dwells there, and I'll not send good dwarves to feed its hunger." But even as the king spoke, a messenger burst into the throne hall, his face pale with terror. "My lord," he gasped, falling to one knee before the throne. "Riders approach from the west, but they bear no banner, and their steeds leave no tracks upon the stone." Through the great windows of the hall, the assembled company could see dark shapes moving against the star-filled sky. They rode upon horses that seemed made of shadow itself, and their forms flickered like flame in a wind. As they drew nearer, a cold wind sprang up, carrying with it the scent of deep places and ancient burning. "Nazgul," Gandalf breathed, his hand tightening upon his staff. The nine ride abroad again. The spectral riders circled the mountain once, twice, thrice, their piercing cries echoing from peak to peak. But they did not descend to challenge the gates of Erebor. Instead, they turned westward again, riding hard toward the Misty Mountains and the darkness that waited there. "They go to their master's summons," the wizard said grimly. "Whatever wakes in Moria calls to all the servants of darkness." As the Nazgul disappeared into the western night, their cries fading to whispers on the wind, Gandalf knew that the time for watching and waiting was nearly at an end. Section 6. The Captive King. In the deepest vaults of Erebor, where the treasure of kings lay heaped in glittering profusion, there was a chamber that few were permitted to enter. Here, bound by chains of mithril and constrained by spells woven in the elder days, sat a figure that made even the bravest dwarves avert their eyes. Thrain, son of Thror, had been king under the mountain before its fall to the dragon. Lost for long years in the dungeons of Dol Guldur, he had been freed when the necromancer fled, but the torment of those dark years had left marks upon him that no healing could wholly cure. His hair was white as winter snow. His eyes held depths of madness and knowledge that no mortal mind should bear. "You have come at last, wizard," Thrain said as Gandalf descended the winding stair to his prison sanctuary. His voice was like the whisper of wind through ancient bones. "I've been expecting you." The chamber was lit by a single lamp that burned with blue flame, casting strange shadows upon the walls. In its light, Thrain appeared almost spectral, as though his long captivity had worn away much of his substance, leaving only will and memory to hold his form together. "You know why I have come," Gandalf replied, settling himself upon a stone seat across from the Mad King. "The darkness stirs again, and you have looked into its heart." A laugh escaped Thrain's lips, bitter as winter wind. I have seen what lies beneath thee. Mountain, the necromancer showed me much, thinking to break my spirit with visions of despair. But in showing me the darkness, he showed me also the light that opposes it. The old king's eyes focused suddenly, and in them, Gandalf saw a clarity that cut through the madness like a blade. "It wakes, wizard. The flame of Udun rises from its long slumber. Already its servants gather in the halls that were once bright with mithril light." "Can it be stopped?" Gandalf asked, though he feared the answer. "Stopped?" Thrain shook his head slowly. "Nay, not stopped. Such things are not easily destroyed, for they are bound to the very foundations of the world, but it can be fought, can be held at bay if the price is paid. What price? The Mad King's eyes grew distant, seeing visions of futures that might yet come to pass. A king must die in the deep places, a star must fall into darkness, and something precious beyond measure must be cast into the flames. Gandalf felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard such riddling prophecies before, and they always spoke of sacrifice and loss beyond imagining. "There is more," Thrain continued, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. The necromancer's flight was not defeat, it was strategy. Even now, he gathers his strength in the east, preparing for war such as has not been seen since the elder days. And when that war comes, the flame beneath the mountain will serve as his ally, cutting the realm in two. "Then we must act swiftly," the wizard said, rising from his seat. "Aye," Thrain agreed. "But remember this, Grey Pilgrim. In the end, it will not be strength of arms that saves us, but the courage of the small and seemingly weak. Look to the Shire when all other hopes fail." With those cryptic words echoing in his mind, Gandalf climbed the winding stair from the depths, leaving the Mad King to his solitary vigil with the treasure of the mountain. Section 7. The Necromancer's Voice. That night, as Gandalf kept watch upon the mountain's highest tower, the darkness spoke to him in a voice he had hoped never to hear again. It came not as sound, but as words that formed themselves within his mind, each syllable dripping with malice and ancient hate. "Mithrandir." The voice was like the hiss of flames consuming dry timber, like the grinding of millstones in the depths of the earth. "Did you think your meddling at Dol Guldur would go unanswered?" The wizard gripped his staff more tightly, feeling the crystal at its tip grow warm in response to the threat. Around him, the very air seemed to thicken, as though the darkness pressed in from all sides. "I know what you seek to prevent," the voice continued, and in it, Gandalf heard the terrible certainty of one who had seen the threads of fate. "But you are too late. Already my servant wakes in the halls beneath the mountain. Soon it will walk in flame and shadow, and all the works of the dwarves will be as ash before it. Sauron." Gandalf spoke the name aloud, though it burned his throat to do so. "You reveal yourself too soon. Your strength is not yet ready for open war." A sound like distant laughter echoed in the wizard's mind. "Is it not? Even now, my servants gather in the east. The 9 ride forth to do my bidding. And soon, very soon, I shall have back that which was taken from me." The mention of the ring sent a thrill of alarm through Gandalf's heart. For years he had wondered about Bilbo's simple gold band, suspecting but not daring to confirm his fears. Now, in the Dark Lord's boasting, he heard confirmation of what he had long dreaded. "You begin to understand." Sauron's voice was like silk drawn over a blade. "The ring calls to me across the leagues, as it has called since first it was lost. Soon its bearer will feel that call, and will come to me willingly, bringing my precious back to its master." "The ring will never serve you again," Gandalf declared, though he felt the weight of uncertainty in his words. "There are powers in this world that you have not counted." Powers? The Dark Lord's amusement was terrible to hear. "What powers, Mithrandir? The kingdoms of men grow weak and divided. The elves fade and diminish. Even the dwarves huddle in their mountains, afraid to delve too deep. And you are but one, alone against the rising darkness. The wizard felt the truth in those words, like a physical blow, yet still he stood firm, drawing upon wells of strength that went deeper than mere flesh and bone. "I am not alone," he said quietly, "and you forget. Darkness cannot endure where light shines true and bright." The presence withdrew then, but not before delivering a final warning. "Enjoy your small victories while you may, grey fool. When the Balrog walks once more beneath the sun, you will understand how futile your resistance truly is." Silence returned to the mountaintop, but it was the silence of a held breath, of a storm gathering force before it breaks. In the east, the first pale light of dawn was beginning to touch the horizon, but it seemed weak and distant against the weight of darkness that pressed upon the world. Gandalf remained at his post until full sunrise, his mind racing with plans and possibilities, all of them shadowed by the terrible certainty that time was running out. Section 8. Fire in the Darkness. When the sun stood at noon height above Erebor, casting sharp shadows from the mountain's peak, Gandalf made his decision. The warnings and prophecies, the dark presence that even now pressed against the borders of his thought, all pointed to one inescapable conclusion. If the Balrog was indeed stirring in Moria's depths, then it must be confirmed, and if possible, countered before its awakening could bring ruin to all the free lands. "I must go west," he told King Durin, as they stood together on the great platform before the mountain's gates. "There are things that must be known, questions that demand answers, even if the seeking brings peril." The Dwarf King's face was grave. "You go to Moria, then, to the Black Pit itself." "Only to its borders," Gandalf replied, though both knew that borders meant little where such ancient evil was concerned. "I will not venture deep into those halls unbidden, but if there are signs to be read, paths to be watched, I must see them with my own eyes." Durin nodded slowly. "Then you go with my blessing, and with such aid as I can give." He gestured, and a company of his best warriors came forward, armed and armored for battle. "These will ride with you to the mountain's borders." But Gandalf shook his head. "This path I must walk alone. Where I go, mortal feet should not follow, and steel and stone will avail nothing against the powers that dwell in the deep places." So it was that the grey pilgrim rode forth from Erebor as he had come, alone save for Shadowfax, whose courage was greater than that of many heroes. Westward they rode, through valleys where the shadows seemed to linger overlong, across streams whose waters ran dark and swift toward the distant sea. As they drew nearer to the Misty Mountains, the very air grew thick and oppressive. Strange mists rose from hollows in the earth, and the birds fell silent in the trees. Even Shadowfax seemed troubled, his great head turning often toward the peaks that rose like broken teeth against the sky. On the second day of their journey, they came to the valley that lay before Moria's gates. Here Gandalf paused, for the change that had come over the place was terrible to behold. Where once the Mirror had reflected sky and stars, now its waters were black as pitch, and things moved beneath its surface that had no business in the upper world. The very stones of the mountainside seemed to weep with moisture that gleamed red in the afternoon light. From fissures in the rock came wisps of vapor that stung the eyes and burned the throat. And from somewhere deep within the mountain came a sound like distant drumming, slow and measured as a funeral march. As Gandalf watched, a a flock of crows rose from the mountain's flanks, circling once before flying eastward with harsh cries of alarm. In their wake came a sound that made the wizard's blood run cold, a low growling that seemed to emanate from the very bones of the earth. Something was indeed stirring in the darkness below. Something that had slept for long ages was beginning to wake, and its awakening would bring fire and shadow to all the lands of Middle-earth. Shadowfax whinnied nervously, and Gandalf laid a calming hand upon the great horse's neck. "Peace, my friend," he murmured. "We will not venture into those accursed halls. Not yet. But we have learned what we came to learn." Section 9. Returned to the Wise Swift as Stormwind, Shadowfax bore his rider back across the leagues to Lorien, where the lords of the White Council waited in the twilight glade. Here, beneath the golden canopy of the Malin trees, Gandalf told of all he had seen and heard, the drums in the deep places, the voice of the Dark Lord in his mind, and the terrible certainty that ancient evil was stirring once more. Lord Elrond sat silent through the telling, his ageless face grave with sorrow. The Lord of Rivendell had seen much in his long years: the fall of kingdoms, the fading of peoples, the slow retreat of light before the advancing darkness. Yet in his eyes lay depths of wisdom that spoke of hope enduring even in the darkest hour. Galadriel listened with her face turned toward the west, as though she could see across the leagues to the shadow-haunted peaks of the Misty Mountains. In her hand, Nenya flickered with uncertain light, and her voice, when she spoke, was like silver bells touched by frost. "The Balrog wakes," she said simply. "I have seen it in my mirror, a flame of Udun walking once more beneath the sun. Soon the halls of Moria will burn with fire that no water can quench." Saruman the White, chief among the Istari, paced restlessly at the glade's edge, his mind clearly working to understand the full implications of what they faced. His robes gleamed like fresh snow in the starlight, and his voice held the authority of one long accustomed to command. "If this is true," he said at last, "then all our plans must be reconsidered. A Balrog loose in the heart of Middle-earth changes everything. The mountain passes will become highways for evil, and all the lands between Rovanion and the sea will lie open to attack." "Not if we act swiftly," Gandalf replied. "There are powers yet in this world that evil has not counted. The kingdoms of men may be divided, but they are not without courage. The dwarves still remember the glory of their ancestors, and there are others, small perhaps in the Dark Lord's reckoning, but great in their purpose." Elrond nodded slowly. "You speak of the halflings of the Shire, yet how can such simple folk stand against the darkness that rises?" "As they have always stood," Galadriel answered softly, "with courage born not of strength, but of love. Love for their homes, their gardens, their simple pleasures. Such courage has power that the wise do not always recognize." The debate continued through the night, as the lords of the White Council weighed strategy and counted the strength that remained to the free peoples. Yet even as they spoke, all knew that the time for mere planning was past. Soon choices would have to be made, and the consequences of those choices would echo through all the ages of the world. As dawn broke over the golden trees of Lorien, the council reached its decision. The threat from Moria could not be ignored, but neither could it be faced directly, not yet. Instead, they would work to counter Sauron's growing power in the east, while keeping careful watch upon the ancient evil that stirred beneath the mountains. "Let the Balrog wake," Saruman declared with grim satisfaction. "We have strength enough to contain it, if we act with wisdom and foresight." But Gandalf, looking into the mirror's depths, saw visions that troubled him greatly. Visions of fire walking in darkness, of kingdoms falling, and of a small figure bearing a burden too great for any mortal to bear. Section 10. Stirring the North. From Lorien rode Gandalf northward once more, but his path led not to Erebor now, but to the Grey Havens and the halls of the Eldar who dwelt there still. For if the ancient enemy was indeed stirring, then all the free peoples must be warned, and alliances forged that might yet stand against the coming storm. Lord Círdan the shipwright received him in the high tower that looked out over the grey waters of the sea. Ancient beyond measure was this lord of the elves, his beard white as sea foam, his eyes holding depths of memory that reached back to the very foundations of the world. Upon his hand gleamed Narya, the red ring, and in its light Gandalf saw wisdom that had endured through all the long ages since the stars were first kindled. "The shadow rises once more," Círdan said, without preamble, for he had seen the signs in the wheeling of gulls and the colour of the evening sky. "I had hoped for more years of peace, more time to gather strength against the darkness, but it seems that hope was vain." Together they walked upon the high walls of the harbour, looking eastward toward the lands that lay beneath gathering shadow. Ships rode at anchor in the harbour below, their white hulls gleaming in the moonlight, and from their masts flew banners that spoke of realms beyond the circles of the world. "There is word from Greenwood," Círdan reported. "King Thranduil sends tidings of great spiders creeping from the south, and bats flying by day where no bats should be. The very trees whisper of evil walking beneath their eaves. And from Rivendell, scouts report strange movements along the Misty Mountains' eastern flanks. Companies of orcs march by night where they dare not go by day, and wolves howl in valleys that have known silence for centuries." As they spoke, a ship's bell chimed the changing of the watch, its clear tone carrying across the water like a voice from the undying lands. But even that pure sound seemed muted now, as though the very air had grown thick with approaching storm. "What of the kingdoms of men?" Gandalf asked. "Do they sense the growing danger?" Círdan's expression grew troubled. "Some do. The Dunedain Rangers speak of increased orc activity along their borders, and strange riders seen in the wild lands where no riders should go. But the kings in their halls hear only what they wish to hear, and see only what serves their immediate purposes." It was an old lament, one that had been heard in every age when darkness rose to threaten the light. Men were valiant in war and noble in peace, but their lives were brief, and they forgot too easily the lessons that their fathers had learned at great cost. Yet even as he spoke of their failings, Círdan's voice held affection for the children of Ilúvatar. "Still, when the hour of greatest need comes, they will remember who they are. The blood of kings flows in their veins, and courage that has never wholly failed." Through the night they planned and pondered, weighing what forces might be gathered against the growing threat. By dawn, messages were on their way to every corner of Middle-earth where the free peoples dwelt, warnings of danger, calls for vigilance, and quiet words about alliances that might yet save the world from shadow. But even as the gulls bore their tidings eastward, both elf lord and wizard knew that words alone would not suffice. Soon steel would ring on steel, and the fate of all would hang upon the courage of the few. Section 11. A Hobbit Remembered. When the road turned southward from the Grey Havens, Gandalf's thoughts went before him to a land of green hills and quiet streams, where trouble seldom came, and the greatest concern of most folk was whether the crops would ripen well. The Shire lay sleeping beneath autumn's golden touch, unaware of the shadow that gathered in the east and the fire that stirred beneath the mountains. Yet it was to the Shire that the wizard's path led now, for in that peaceful land dwelt one whose simple deed might yet play a part in the great music of the world. Bilbo Baggins sat in his study at Bag End, writing in a great book by candlelight, setting down the story of his adventure with the dwarves. His hair was grey now, and lines marked his face, but his eyes still held the light of wonder that had carried him through darkness to find treasure beyond price. "Gandalf!" he cried with delight when the wizard appeared at his door. "How good to see you. Come in, come in. Dinner is nearly ready, and I have a particularly fine bottle of wine that's been waiting for just such an occasion." The hobbit's cheerfulness was like sunshine after storm, and for a moment Gandalf felt the weight of his concerns lift from his shoulders. Here in the Shire, where the greatest evil was a late frost or a poor harvest, it seemed impossible that darkness could ever truly triumph. Over dinner, they spoke of many things, of books and maps, of weather and crops, of the small happenings that made up the daily life of the Shire. But gradually, Gandalf's questions turned to other matters. "That ring of yours," he said casually, as Bilbo absently turned the golden band upon his finger. "You still wear it, I see." "Oh yes," Bilbo replied, his hand moving unconsciously to cover the ring. "Useful thing, you know. Helps me avoid unwanted visitors and keeps the Sackville Bagginses from bothering me too much." There was something in the hobbit's voice when he spoke of the ring, a note of possessiveness that made Gandalf's heart sink. He had hoped, oh how he had hoped, that his suspicions were groundless, that the simple gold band was indeed nothing more than it appeared. But the signs were there for those who knew how to read them. "Have you ever thought of giving it up?" the wizard asked quietly. "Passing it on to someone else, perhaps?" Bilbo's face darkened, and for a moment, something flickered in his eyes that was not entirely wholesome. "Give it up? Why should I? It's mine, my own. I found it. I won it fairly." The words were almost an echo of others spoken long ago, in darker places by fouler mouths. Gandalf felt a chill run down his spine as he recognized the ring's influence working upon its bearer. "Of course," he said mildly, not wishing to press the matter further. "I was merely curious." But throughout the evening, he watched Bilbo carefully, noting how the hobbit's hand often strayed to the ring, how his face grew troubled when he thought himself unobserved. The burden was growing heavier, as Gandalf had feared it would. Soon, very soon, something would have to be done. As he prepared to leave Bag End the next morning, Gandalf turned back to look at the round green door that had welcomed him so many times. Peace still reigned in the Shire, but for how much longer? Already the ring was stirring, calling to its master across the leagues. Soon its influence would grow too strong for any mortal to bear, and then the fate of all Middle-earth might well rest upon the courage of a simple hobbit and the choices he would make in the darkness ahead. Section 12. The Plan, set in motion. In the high halls of Erebor, King Dain received a visitor whose presence brought both hope and foreboding. Thorin Oakenshield had been dead these many years, fallen in the Battle of 5 Armies, but his spirit lived on in the songs of his people and the memory of his sacrifice. Now his kinsman Balin, grey-bearded and wise, stood before the throne with eyes that burned with ancient fire. "The time has come," Balin declared, his voice carrying the weight of long-held dreams. "The road to Moria lies open, and there are treasures there that belong by right to our people. The mithril mines alone would make us the richest kingdom in all Middle-earth." King Dain's face was grave as he listened to the old dwarf's words. He knew the hunger that burned in Balin's heart, the desire to reclaim the ancient halls where their fathers had delved and built in the glory days before the shadow fell. Yet he also knew the price that such dreams might exact. "You speak of treasures," the king replied carefully, "but what of the danger? The reports from the western borders grow more troubling with each passing day. Strange lights, fell sounds, the very stones weeping blood. These are not signs that encourage bold ventures." But Balin's mind was set, and with him stood others of like heart, Ori the scribe, Oin the healer, and many more who had heard the tales of Moria's glory and burned to see those halls restored. They spoke of the great library of Mazarbul, where the deeds of their ancestors were recorded in runes of gold. They spoke of the Chamber of Records, where the laws and customs of their people were preserved in stone. Most of all, they spoke of Durin's throne, carved from a single mighty stone and set with gems that caught the light of the world's beginning. "The shadow may have touched those halls," Balin admitted, "but we are not defenseless. We have steel and stone, courage and cunning. If our fathers could delve those passages, why should we not reclaim them?" Through the long watches of the night, the debate continued. Some spoke for caution, remembering the tales of the Balrog and the doom that had fallen upon Balin's ancestors. Others argued for boldness, claiming that fortune favored the brave and that glory was not won by those who cowered in safety. In the end, it was neither argument nor persuasion that decided the matter, but a sign that none could ignore. As dawn broke over the mountain, a raven came flying from the west, bearing upon its leg a message written in the ancient script of the Dwarves. It spoke of mithril veins newly revealed, of passages cleared by some mighty force, of opportunities that might not come again. "It is a sign," Balin declared triumphantly. "The mountain itself calls to us, bidding us return to our ancient home." King Dain read the message with heavy heart, for he alone among them recognized the hand that had written it. No dwarf had penned those runes, but something else, something that knew well how to craft bait for the trap it was setting. Yet he could not speak his suspicions aloud, for what proof had he save the testimony of his own fears? And if he was wrong, if the message was genuine, then he would be denying his people their rightful inheritance out of mere cowardice. So it was that the expedition to Moria was approved, though with many conditions and warnings. Balin would lead, for his knowledge of the ancient ways was unmatched among the living. With him would go a picked company of warriors and craftsmen, enough to establish a foothold, but not so many that their loss would cripple the kingdom. As the preparations began, Gandalf's words echoed in Dain's memory. Soon, choices would have to be made, and the consequences would echo through all the ages of the world. Section 13. The Fire Awakens. deep beneath the roots of the Misty Mountains, in halls that had once rung with the voices of dwarves and gleamed with the light of 1,000 lamps, something stirred that had not moved for nigh on 500 years. The Balrog of Morgoth, the flame of Udun, felt the approach of the dwarf company through the very stones of the mountain, and its ancient heart quickened with hunger long denied. It had been patient, this creature of shadow and fire, patient beyond the understanding of mortal minds. Through the long centuries of its exile, it had waited in the deepest places, feeding upon the mountain's heart, growing strong upon fires that burned at the world's core. The dwarves had delved greedily and deep, and in their delving, they had come at last to chambers that were better left sealed. Now, as Balin's company made camp in the outer halls of Moria, the Balrog tasted their presence like wine upon its tongue. 29 dwarves they were, armed with the finest steel and protected by mail that gleamed like silver in the darkness. Yet what was steel and mail against the servants of the ancient darkness? In the chamber of Mazabul, where the records of the dwarves were kept in books of stone and metal, Balin established his seat. Here his people worked to clear the debris of ages, to restore the ancient halls to something approaching their former glory. They found treasures beyond counting, mithril mail that gleamed like silver, gems that caught and held the light of their torches, weapons forged by smiths whose skill had been legendary even in the elder days. For a time, it seemed that their boldness would be rewarded. The upper halls were clear of immediate danger, and the mithril veins proved richer than even the most optimistic had dared hope. Messages were sent back to Erebor, telling of success and promising greater triumphs to come. But in the deepest watches of the night, when the dwarves slept fitfully in halls that echoed with memories of ancient glory, other sounds began to penetrate their dreams. From far below came the rhythm of drums, slow and measured as a funeral march. The very stones beneath their feet grew warm, as though vast fires burned in the mountain's heart. Oin the healer was the first to report the strange dreams that plagued their sleep. Visions of fire walking in darkness, of wings that blotted out the stars, of a great eye that watched them from the shadows. Others spoke of whispers in languages that hurt the mind to hear, of footsteps in passages that should have been empty. "It is nothing," Balin declared, though his own sleep was troubled, and his hand often strayed to the hilt of his sword. "The mountain remembers, that is all. These halls have been empty too long. They need time to grow accustomed to our presence again." Yet even as he spoke the words, he knew them for false comfort. Something was indeed stirring in the depths below, something that had been waiting for just such an opportunity as this. The trap was closing, and there was no escape save through fire and blood. On the night of the new moon, when darkness lay thick upon the world, the drums in the deep places fell silent. In that sudden stillness, more terrible than any sound, the dwarves huddled together in the chamber of Mazabul and waited for the dawn that might never come. For in the silence, they could hear it approaching, the footfall of something vast and terrible, climbing slowly from the roots of the world toward the halls where mortals dared to trespass. Section 14. A blade, not yet drawn. Word of the expedition's fate came to Erebor on the wings of ravens, black birds that spoke in the ancient tongue of death and sorrow. King Durin received the tidings in his throne hall, surrounded by the lords of his house, and the weight of kingship had never felt heavier upon his shoulders. "They are gone," the raven croaked, its voice harsh with foreboding. "All gone into the darkness. The flame walks in Mazarbel, and the drums beat for the dead." The silence that followed was deeper than the quiet of tombs. 29 dwarves had ridden west with hope in their hearts and songs upon their lips. Now their names would be carved upon stones of mourning, and their fate would stand as warning to any who dared the darkness of the deep places. Yet even as the news spread through the halls of Erebor, other tidings came from the south and east, reports that filled the Mountain King with dread far greater than grief for the fallen. Armies were moving in the darkness beyond the borders of the known world. The Nazgul rode abroad on errands of malice and terror, and from Dol Guldur, though it stood empty of its former master, came whispers of evil that set men's teeth on edge and made horses shy from shadows. "War comes," Dain said grimly to his assembled lords, "not the petty squabbles of rival kingdoms, but war such as has not been seen since the elder days. We must prepare, and quickly, for when the storm breaks, it will test every alliance and try every heart." From his place among the king's counselors, the aged warrior Glóin spoke words that echoed the thoughts of all present. "Where is the grey wizard when we have such need of his counsel? Gandalf would know what course to take in these dark times." But Gandalf was far away, pursuing his own errands in the service of the light. Unknown to the dwarves, he rode even now through the wild lands between Rivendell and the Shire, bearing news that would shake the foundations of the peaceful valley. For the time of watching and waiting was past, and choices that would determine the fate of all Middle-earth could no longer be delayed. In the armories of Erebor, smiths worked through the night to forge weapons for the battles that were surely coming. Steel rang upon steel in the workshops below the mountain, and the fires of the forges burned bright against the growing darkness. Yet for all their preparation, all their strength of arm and stoutness of heart, the dwarves knew that steel alone would not suffice against the powers that rose to challenge the light. Somewhere in the wide world, other forces were stirring, powers that might yet tip the balance between hope and despair. In Lorien, the Lady Galadriel gazed into her mirror and saw visions of futures that hung upon threads thin as spider's silk. In Rivendell, Lord Elrond consulted the ancient lore and found there warnings of trials yet to come. And in a simple hobbit hole in the Shire, Bilbo Baggins turned a golden ring upon his finger and wondered why his dreams were filled with fire and shadow. The pieces of the great game were moving toward their appointed places, and soon the hand that had set them in motion would reveal itself at last. For the Dark Lord was patient, but his patience was not infinite, and the time was coming when all pretense would be cast aside. In the deep places beneath Moria, the Balrog had tasted dwarf blood again after centuries of hunger, and its appetite was whetted for greater prey. Soon, very soon, it would spread its wings of shadow and bring fire to all the lands beneath the sky. Section 15. The Kingdom Reclaimed. In the grey light of winter's ending, when the first flowers pushed through the snow-covered earth, and hope stirred once more in the hearts of the free peoples, there came news that lifted spirits, like the song of larks at dawn. The kingdom under the mountain had indeed been reclaimed, but not by dwarf steel or dragon fire. From the grey havens, rode a company of knights whose shields bore the silver tree and 7 stars of Gondor, and at their head rode one whose face was grim with purpose and bright with hope. Aragorn, son of Arathorn, had come north from the wars in the south, bearing tidings that would change the course of the world. "The Balrog is fallen," he announced to the assembled lords in Erebor's great hall. "By sword and flame it was destroyed in the depths beneath the mountain, though the victory was bought at a price that none who love wisdom would willingly pay." King Dain received this news with wonder and sorrow mingled, for though the immediate threat to his people was ended, he sensed that the victory had cost more than mere treasure or lives. In the ranger's eyes lay depths of grief that spoke of losses beyond measure. "Who was it that stood against the ancient evil?" the Dwarf King asked. "What hero dared the depths and emerged victorious?" "Gandalf the Grey," Aragorn replied simply. "He stood upon the bridge of Khazad-dûm and would not let the darkness pass. Staff and steel he wielded against the Balrog's whip and sword, and in the end, both fell into the abyss together." A great silence fell upon the hall, for all who heard those words understood their meaning. The grey pilgrim, who had walked the paths of Middle-earth for more years than most could count, had given his life to save them all from the fire of Udun. No monument of stone or gold could match the magnitude of that sacrifice. Yet even as they mourned the wizard's passing, other news came that stirred hope in hearts grown weary with sorrow. In the south, the armies of Gondor had won a great victory against the forces of darkness. Osgiliath had been retaken, and the enemy driven back across the river Anduin. For the first time in many years, it seemed that the tide of war might be turning in favor of the light. But the greatest victory, Aragorn continued, was won not by sword or spear, but by the courage of 2 small folk who dared what none else would dare. The ring-bearer has completed his task, and the shadow in the east is lifted forever. The tale he told then was like something from the elder days, when the world was young and heroes walked openly beneath the sun, of hobbits who carried burdens too great for any mortal to bear, of a friendship that endured even unto death, of choices made in darkness that brought light to all the world. In the gardens of the Shire, Samwise Gamgee tended his flowers with hands that had once touched the very foundations of the world. Beside him worked his master, Frodo Baggins, whose face bore the marks of trials that few could imagine and fewer still could understand. They spoke little of their journey into the heart of darkness, but in their silence lay a peace that surpassed all understanding. The age of the rings was ending, and with it passed much that was beautiful and wise, yet new hopes were born to replace the old, and the world turned ever toward the light, sustained by the courage of the small and seemingly weak who had dared everything for love. Section 16. A ring still sleeps. In the fading light of the Third Age, when the last ship had sailed from the grey havens and the elves had passed into the undying lands, there remained in Middle-earth still shadows of the ancient darkness. Not all the servants of Morgoth had been found and destroyed. Not every weapon of malice had been broken upon the anvil of defeat. In the deepest places of the world, where the roots of mountains touched the fires at the earth's heart, things stirred that had slumbered since the world's beginning. The Balrog of Moria had been but one of many creatures that served the ancient enemy, and though its fire was quenched forever, others remained in the darkness, patient and hungry for the light of day. Yet for all the vigilance of the wise, for all the strength of kings and the courage of common folk, there was one shadow that none had suspected, one danger that had lain hidden beneath their very noses. In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit, and that hobbit bore upon his finger a ring of gold that gleamed with inner fire. But this was not the ring of power that had been unmade in the fires of Mount Doom. This was another ring, wrought in secret by hands that served the darkness, hidden among the lesser works of the enemy, so that its true nature might not be discovered. For Sauron, in his cunning, had made not one ring of power, but many, and though most had been found and destroyed, some few remained to work their malice in the world. Bilbo Baggins sat in his study at Bag End, writing by candlelight in the great book that told the story of his adventure. His hair was white now, with the weight of years, and his face bore lines that spoke of burdens carried long and far. Yet his eyes still held the light of wonder that had carried him through darkness to find treasure beyond price. Upon his finger, the ring turned slowly, catching the candlelight and throwing it back in gleams of gold and shadow. To any who looked upon it, it seemed merely a simple band of metal, worth perhaps a few coins in the markets of men. Yet those with eyes to see might have noted how it seemed to pulse with its own inner rhythm, like a heart beating in the darkness. For this ring too had been touched by the ancient malice, though its power was subtler than that of its greater cousin. It did not confer dominion over realms or mastery over the hearts of men. Instead, it worked more slowly, more quietly, extending the life of its bearer while slowly consuming the light within. Year by year, age by age, it would feed upon the soul that wore it, until nothing remained but hunger and shadow. Already the signs were there for those who knew how to read them. Bilbo's appetite had grown fitful, and he often forgot to eat for days at a time. His sleep was troubled by dreams of deep places and hidden treasures, and he spoke often of journeys to lands that no map could show. Most telling of all, he had begun to avoid the bright places of the Shire, preferring the shadows of his hole to the golden light of afternoon. The ring's influence grew stronger with each passing day, and soon its bearer would be wholly in its thrall. Then would begin the slow work of corruption that was the ring's true purpose, to create another Gollum, another wretched creature to serve the darkness in the deep places of the world. Yet hope was not wholly lost, for there were still those in Middle-earth who remembered the ancient lore and could recognize the signs of such corruption. In Rivendell, Lord Elrond kept watch over the healing of the world, and his wisdom was deep as the foundations of the earth. In Lorien, though dimmed now by the passing of the Ring of Power, Lady Galadriel's sight could still pierce many veils. And somewhere on the roads of Middle-earth, there walked still those who served the light. Rangers and warriors, lords and common folk, all united in their determination that the darkness should not rise again. For though the Ring of Power was destroyed and its master cast down, the battle between light and shadow was as old as the world itself, and would continue until the world's ending. The ring upon Bilbo's finger pulsed once, softly, like a heart beginning to wake from long sleep. In the candlelight, its surface seemed to shift and flow, and for a moment, just a moment, shapes moved within its depths that had no business in the waking world. The shadows were stirring once more, and soon the guardians of the light would have to choose between the peace they had won and the vigilance that peace demanded. Section 17. The enemy withdraws. When spring came at last to the Shire, it brought with it winds that spoke of change and renewal, of old things passing away and new things being born. In the gardens of Bag End, the first flowers pushed through the dark earth with a determination that spoke of life triumphant over the powers of shadow and decay. Yet for all the beauty of the season, for all the hope that stirred in the hearts of simple folk who knew nothing of the great affairs of the world, there was one in the Shire whose heart remained troubled. Bilbo Baggins sat upon his garden bench, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and the ring upon his finger seemed heavier than lead. It had been many months since Gandalf's last visit, many months since any word had come from the wide world beyond the Shire's borders. In that silence, Bilbo had found a kind of peace, yet it was the peace of winter rather than spring, cold, still, and somehow final. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the old hobbit felt a familiar stirring in his heart, the same restlessness that had once driven him from his comfortable hole to seek adventure in the wide world. But this was different, darker, tinged with longings that he dared not name even to himself. The ring pulsed upon his finger, and in its golden depths he seemed to see paths that led away from the Shire, away from the comfortable familiarity of home, toward places where the shadows were deep and the light was dim. There, whispered a voice that might have been his own. There were treasures beyond imagining, secrets that the wise had forgotten, powers that could make even a simple hobbit the master of kings. With an effort that left him trembling, Bilbo closed his eyes and turned his thoughts away from such visions. Yet even as he did, he knew that the struggle was growing harder with each passing day. The ring's influence was subtle but inexorable, and sooner or later it would claim him wholly. Unknown to the old hobbit, other eyes watched him from the shadows of his garden. A figure cloaked and hooded stood among the trees at the lane's end, and though no light fell upon his face, his eyes gleamed with wisdom and sorrow. Gandalf had returned to the Shire, but not as the grey pilgrim who had once walked its lanes with staff and pack. Death and resurrection had changed him, had given him power to see things that were hidden from mortal sight. In the wizard's enhanced vision, the ring upon Bilbo's finger blazed like a small sun, its malice visible as writhing shadows that coiled about the hobbit's form. This was indeed one of the lesser rings of power, wrought in secret by the enemy's hand, and its corruption was already far advanced. Yet as Gandalf watched, he saw something else, a light that burned still within Bilbo's heart, small perhaps but steady, the same light that had sustained him through the darkness beneath the Misty Mountains long ago. It was that light, the wizard realized, that had kept the ring's influence in check for so many years. Without it, Bilbo would have long since been claimed by the darkness. The time had come for choices that could no longer be delayed. The ring could not be allowed to complete its work of corruption, yet removing it from its bearer would require a strength of will that few possessed. In the end, it would come down to Bilbo himself, to the courage that had once carried him through dragon fire and goblin tunnels, to the love of simple things that was the hobbit's greatest defense against the powers of darkness. As if sensing the wizard's presence, Bilbo looked up from his contemplation of the stars. For a moment, Their eyes met across the darkened garden, and in that look passed understanding that needed no words. "Gandalf," the hobbit said quietly, "I've been expecting you." "Have you indeed?" the wizard replied, stepping from the shadows into the pale starlight. "And what have you been expecting me to say?" Bilbo's hand moved unconsciously to cover the ring, and his face grew troubled. "That it's time, I suppose. Time to choose between the darkness and the light, between what I want and what I ought to do. And what will you choose?" For a long moment, Bilbo was silent, his gaze turning once more to the stars that wheeled overhead in their ancient dance. When he spoke at last, his voice was steady despite the tears that gleamed upon his cheeks. "I choose the light," he said simply. "I choose home." Section 18. Hope in Ashes. In the grey hour before dawn, when the world lay hushed between night and day, Bilbo Baggins stood upon the threshold of Bag End and looked back one last time upon the home that had sheltered him for so many years. In his hand he held a walking stick, and upon his back a pack filled with the simple necessities of the road. But upon his finger there was no ring, for that burden had been laid aside at last. The parting had not been easy, though it had been necessary. When Bilbo had removed the ring from his finger and placed it upon the mantelpiece, the shadows that had gathered about him for so many years seemed to flee like mist before the morning sun. Yet with their departure came a weariness that went deeper than mere age, a tiredness that spoke of burdens carried long and far. "Where will you go?" Gandalf had asked as they stood together in the comfortable parlour where so many tales had been told and so many plans laid. "To Rivendell, I think," Bilbo had replied. "Lord Elrond has always said that there would be a place for me there when the time came, and I find that I have a great desire to hear the songs of the elves again, to sit beneath the stars and listen to tales of the elder days." The wizard had nodded, understanding more than mere words could convey. Rivendell was a place of healing, where those who had borne burdens too great for mortal hearts could find rest and renewal. There Bilbo would be welcomed, not as a hero or a bearer of rings, but simply as himself, a hobbit who had done his part in the great music of the world and earned the right to peace. As the first light of dawn touched the hills of the Shire, Bilbo set out upon the road that would carry him away from all that he had known and loved. Yet his step was firm and his heart was light, for he had chosen to walk in the light rather than stumble in the darkness. Behind him, in the parlour of Bag End, the ring lay upon the mantelpiece like a circle of shadow-given form. But its power was broken now, its malice turned in upon itself, and already it was beginning to diminish. Soon, when Gandalf returned with the wisdom and strength to deal with such things, it would be unmade entirely, cast into the fires where all such devices met their end. For the ring had been wrought by malice and sustained by corruption, and when that corruption was removed, it could not long endure. Like all the works of the enemy, it contained within itself the seeds of its own destruction, needing only the light of courage and love to reveal its true nature. The Shire slept on, unaware that one of its most famous sons had departed forever, unaware too that a great danger had been lifted from their midst. In the gardens of Hobbiton, flowers bloomed with a brightness that had not been seen for many years, and the very air seemed cleaner and more wholesome. Yet though this particular shadow had been lifted, others remained in the world, and always would until the world's ending. For light and darkness were eternally opposed, and the battle between them was as old as time itself. In every age, in every generation, there would be those who chose to serve the light and those who fell to the darkness, and the outcome of their struggle would determine the fate of all. But for now, in this moment, hope triumphed over despair, and love proved stronger than malice. The simple hobbit had chosen the light over the darkness, and in that choice lay all the hope that Middle-earth would ever need. As Bilbo walked eastward toward the rising sun, his shadow fell long and dark behind him, but ahead lay light and promise and the hope of peace that surpasses understanding. In the end, perhaps, that was enough.